Hi everyone, welcome to Bonnie Caroline Makes Cards. I have 3 fast and easy Christmas cards featuring Spellbinders MOSAIC BRACKET CARD BUILDER. This fabulous die set comes with the trellis, bracket, the scripty Happy Holiday sentiment, and also an accompanying shadow die. My focus with these cards was to use the trellis in a variety of ways. So let's get started. 2 of the 3 cards have ink smooshed backgrounds. I'm working with Bristol Smooth cardstock. It can withstand a little bit of water, so it is a great candidate for this technique. All of the backgrounds for these cards have been done with Distress Oxide inks. For this first card, I'm working with Mermaid Lagoon, Faded Jeans, and Tumbled Glass. Ink smooshing is such a fun and easy technique. The ink is applied directly to a glass crafting mat and spritzed with a little bit of water. I like to apply the color one at a time, drying in between applications. This approach gives a little bit of control over where that color goes and helps to evenly distribute each of those colors across the panel. The panel is finished up with a little bit of pewter distress stain. I lightly dab it with the white before I apply it to the panel. The stain goes on with a more subtle effect. The panel is finished up with some spatter. I like to use white gouache. I water it down a little bit and it is applied with a small paintbrush. The gouache gives a fine texture to the panel, and there is no need to worry about color bleeding through, as it can with some other mediums. I have everything die cut. Both the trellis and the sentiment will be mounted on foam. I begin by mounting the sentiment on the foam die cut. The die cut foam sentiment has not been removed from the foam backing. I did, however, remove the centers of the letters. After a thin layer of glue is applied, the sentiment is stacked. The foam die cut in its backing leaves an impression that makes it very easy to align the cardstock one to it. I use my craft pick in the center of the letters just to do any final alignment. The sentiments are set aside to dry before they are removed from the backing. If you like dimension like me, this is an easy way to stack those fine die cuts. When applying glue to the cardstock trellis, I do try to get good coverage before it is stacked onto the foam die cut. One is easily aligned on the other. The foam back trellis is then adhered to the background. The shape of the bracket matches that of the top of the trellis and is easily attached. The sentiments are dry and removed from the foam backing. The trellis slightly overhangs my A2 size panel, and so I just trim that off. It is then adhered to an A2 size card base 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I'm then ready to adhere the sentiment die cuts. Beautiful aqua sequins are attached to the small hole detail on the trellis. At the bottom of the trellis and in a couple of areas at the top, the hole detail has been cut in half, so I've cut my sequins in half to cover them. I also add in clear iridescent sequins around the sentiment. All the sequins are topped up with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll probably have noticed that I do this often. When the morning dew is dry, it is clear, leaving a jewel-like effect. When working with other colors of Nouveau Drops, I often will use sequins or confetti as a foundation. The Nouveau Drops do not flatten out and they maintain their high dome shape. And that finishes up our first card. The ink smoosh background for the second card has been done with worn lipstick, picked raspberry, and festive berries. It is applied to the front and back of the panel to help minimize any warping. Like the previous card, it is spattered with white gouache. For this card, the trellis has been adhered directly to the panel. There is a top and a bottom die to create the bracket. The bottom die is used to cut the panel at the top of the trellis. It is mounted on foam and the sides and the bottom are trimmed. The same die is used to cut the top of the panel. I make sure that I push the die in tight against the cardstock. The bracket finishes off the edge of the top of this panel. It is then adhered to an A2 size card base. The leftover ink smooshed cardstock is used to die cut the sentiment. They are stacked on foam die cuts just like the previous card. After the sentiments are adhered to the card, I'm ready to embellish. This card is finished up exactly the same way as the previous card, except this time I'm using the most beautiful iridescent confetti. After the morning dew has been applied to the confetti, this second card with a variation of using the trellis die cut is now complete. Card 3 is on an ink blended background using wilted violet, salty ocean, and tumbled glass. I think subconsciously this inspired my new nail color. The trellis is going to be pieced together to form a complete background, and so it has been die cut 2 times. I want flexibility as I align both panels together, so I've chosen to use Tombow glue. It is applied and then left to dry completely. When this glue dries, it is tacky and repositionable. Perfect when you anticipate that you may have to do a little bit of fussing with your die cuts. After the glue is dry, the 2 trellis die cuts were easily aligned on the background. The panel is going to be die cut with a die from Spellbinders nesting rectangle set. The die is being placed so that the edges on both the top and the bottom, and then side to side, are exactly the same. Because I was die cutting through essentially 2 pieces of cardstock, I did have to help release it in a couple of places. The panel and the white die cut sentiments were mounted on foam. This card is being adorned with a beautiful die set by Spellbinders called Sparkling Mandala. I've used the outline die to cut white foam and also a piece of holographic paper. The detail die was used to cut white cardstock. I'm using Tombow glue and will set it aside to dry until it is tacky. Even though there will be just little hints of the foil paper shining through the mandala, I don't want it dulled by smeared glue. The panel with the trellis applied in a horizontal orientation gives it a completely different look. It is mounted on blue-violet cardstock before being adhered to a top folding A2 size card base. The glue on the mandala dries rather quickly and it is adhered to the foam-backed foil background. And you can see the little hints of color shining through. The sentiments are laid out on the panel to help me center the mandala. After the sentiments are adhered, it's time to add just a little bit more sparkle. For this card, I'm going to embellish the mandala. I'm picking out all the clear lilac colored sequins from this mix. And yes, I'm finishing it off with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. You can only imagine how many bottles I go through. And that wraps up this set of Christmas cards featuring Spellbinders MOSAIC Bracket Card Builder with variations on how the trellis can be used. These simple variations make each of these fast and easy cards unique. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to bonniecarolee.com or to my YouTube channel. As always, I appreciate your visit.